And most people know that the average small business will fail in the first 5 years. What most people don't know, the number one reason? IRS. Go ask an accountant. They don't advertise it, but that's the number one reason. My personal experience saw 2 business owners. One of them messed up figuring their payroll taxes. The other one didn't have the money and neglected it. And by the time they got the money, the agent came in and before any discussion froze their personal bank accounts, their business bank accounts. How many of you know if you can't make payroll, you lose your employees? When people know if you can't pay your suppliers, you got nothing to sell.
Right.
These were, one guy had been in business for 16 years and Shawnee was gone in 2 weeks because of the wonderful IRS. And here's the thing, you also got to get your calculator out and figure out how much your profit and loss your company made, file a federal tax return every year, and if you've ever seen one of these, they can be 100 pages long. Capital equipment, depreciation, expenditures. They're huge, and don't put your calculator away yet, because you got to do the same thing for the state all over again. And in some cases, like Kansas City, Missouri, you got to do it for the city, payroll taxes. I think that 22% is a conservative number, and here's what happens. The fair tax eliminates that. What if the only thing that happened eliminates all corporate taxation? Imagine if every product made here dropped in price by even 20%, what would the impact be? So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to pretend that you are now the CEO of a company, and you got a choice moving farther inland to China, or coming to the new United States with the fair tax in place. First off, 0 income taxes here. How good is that going to look to your profit margin and your shareholders?
Very good.
That's good. You lose 22% of your overhead, you're now instantaneously beyond competitive to everyone else. He says here, impact for jobs be immediate and substantial. We have the most complete infrastructure here. You need electricity? Call up Kansas City Power and Light, they hook you up. You need logistics? Call somebody like my wife to have a truck there tomorrow. Well, or by the end of the week. But anyway, the key is they're going to take care of you. How about this? Most educated and competent workforce in the world. We've all seen the studies how, oh my gosh, our kids don't do well on standardized tests. I'm not talking about tests. I'm talking about average technical competence. I would willing to bet, and my middle schoolers could, but probably all the middle schoolers in America could have built a much better looking PowerPoint presentation than half the time it took me. They've got MP3 players, cell phones, laptops, Facebook accounts. They know technology, and certainly compared to somebody who grew up with no electricity. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you got that advantage. Then, the customer base is here. You don't have to worry about the logistics of shipping stuff across the ocean, customs and language. The leadership is here. It's hard to manage a manufacturing plant you can't walk into every day. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So that gets it here. Where would you go as a business leader?
Here. Yeah.
2 people believe they come here. Anybody else going for China?
Ireland.
How about this? Everybody that come to America, raise your hand.
Yeah.
Everybody go to China, raise your other hand. And those that just don't raise their hands on Thursday evening. Anybody? Okay, we got one guy over here. All right, but see, what happens is, do you understand what this will do? It doesn't just encourage companies to come here, it forces them. How could you compete if your customer can cut 22% of their cost out? You can't compete with that. It's not going to happen. And here's the subtlety. Here's why, and again, if it was just 0 corporate taxes and the profits go up, they'd come here. They've shown the willingness to go overseas to avoid the taxes. This right here is the subtlety that I think most people don't understand. What would you like? You got a product made in Mexico, China, product made in the United States. Which one are you buying? U.S. United States. What people do not understand is in this economy, people being underemployed, unemployed, not making enough money, they're not stretching dollars anymore. They're stretching pennies. And when you stretch pennies, that means Walmart. Now, I'm not here to beat up on Walmart tonight, but I read a book 2 years ago called The Flat Earth is Broken. And it says Walmart is responsible for over 60% of the trade deficit in this country. But people today don't have the luxury of deciding where something's bought. They just got to get the most bang for the buck. And so what happens is, as more people go on unemployment, more people go to Walmart, more people buy Chinese products, which puts more people on unemployment, which puts more people to want. You see the negative spiral that we're in? Mm-hmm. We will never solve that until we fix our tax system. And one more thing I've got to add in here. Some people I talk to, it affects their sensibilities that a corporation would not pay taxes. I mean, think how much money they make. They're not paying their fair share. I'm going to ask you a question. Set your emotions aside and answer this question. Do companies pay taxes? Or do consumers? If you've had a basic economics class in high school, you know taxes to a corporation are like utilities. They're an expense. They pass that on to the consumer. And yet, that has got to be the greatest trick of the politician. How else would you be able to raise taxes on people and have them cheer? There's no other way to do that in the world, and it's time that we understand that. Well, I got about 500 examples we don't have time for. So let's dive into the next one. National debt. Now this is where you're definitely going to take notes. There's 4 key numbers to understand. I'm going to give you the first 3 so it's not overwhelming. Tax revenue. A better way to call that, we should just call that income. If you're a company, that's your gross sales, gross receipts. If you're an individual, that's just your paycheck, right? Next thing we got to look at, annual deficit. Now that's kind of a weird word, annual deficit, because people don't have those in particular. That's only in government. That's overspending. If you are a corporation, that's called operating in the red. And if you're an individual in the financial services industry, we said you're living beyond your means. Okay? And then the third number is national debt or money borrowed. Now there's 2 reasons there's a lot of confusion. Number 1, I'm fixing to show you it's an awful lot of zeros. And number 2, politicians and media will talk about annual numbers, 10-year numbers, and total numbers in the same sentence. Now it's up to you to decide whether it's on purpose or through their own ignorance, okay? But that's what happens. So let's talk about our federal government right now. This is out of Department of the Treasury produces something called the Citizens Guide every year. For a numbers guide, we've got some great charts in there. There's all kinds of numbers. I encourage you to go read it. But the last 2 years, what I found striking, the 2009 and 2010 revenue was within about $30 billion both years. I rounded it down to $2.1 trillion. We overspend $1.4 trillion average last 2 years in a row. $14.3 trillion borrowed. We just hit the borrowing ceiling, didn't we? Yeah. And the key is you got to understand the ratios. So here's the tools. First thing you're going to do is write all those numbers out longhand with the zeros. See how intimidating that is? It's not as important how big the numbers are, but it's important to understand the ratios. So go cross out. And here's the thing. If they talk about a tax savings or a revenue increase, just write the numbers out. As long as the columns are in order, you can cross out as many zeros as you need to. I chose to cross out 8 zeros, which leaves us with $21,000 in income, $14,000 overspending, $143,000 borrowed. Just so happens that number is very close to the average income for an individual. So let's say you're an individual, you're making 21 grand a year, you're overspending $14,000 a year. How long is that going to go on?
Not very long.
2 years.
Probably not long, but our government's been doing it for the last 3 or 4 years. Then you owe $143,000. Now if I sat down with you as a financial person, I'm guessing 60, 80 grand, that's got to be a house, right? It's an asset. Worst case, we can sell that and get you out of debt. But we're talking the federal government here. We're not still paying off the Louisiana Purchase.
Right.
We call that the financial industry junk debt. No idea what you spent on. Credit cards, bank loans. No one in Washington probably could tell you. What did we spend that on? I don't know, but we got the bill here to prove it. So if that was you, what would you do? Well, as a financial advisor, I'd sit down with you and we'd start working up a budget to live on $21,000. But how many of you know nobody wants to reduce their standard of living, do they? That's no different in Washington. So they're going to figure out ways to make more money. So let's say you finish your online degree or you go get another job. Somehow you double your income. What's the impact of doubling the income? Well, now you make $42,000 a year. You're spending $35,000, so that says you got $7,000 extra. You still owe the $143,000, but you're responsible now. You're educated, and you got a better job. So you're going to put the $7,000 towards the debt. What's the net result? Well, that's 21 years just to pay off the principal, assuming that you don't pay the interest and you don't acquire any more debt. But we're not talking about the individual. We're talking about the federal government. The federal government can't, unfortunately, go get another job. They have to double the taxes. Now, we already saw how a 10% difference in federal taxes forced all the companies to China, right?
Yep.
What do you think 70% tax would do to the corporations here? Within 2 years, they'd all be gone. And best guess in here, and hopefully I don't offend anybody, but I'm guessing your tax rate is probably around 25%. How excited would you be to give half your paycheck to the federal government for the next 21 years? Any takers? No. And the worst part is, how's the conversation going to go? We owe that money to other countries and to individuals within the United States. We call the other countries up and say, hey, great news. We got it under control. We're paying you off in 21 years. Bad news is we're not paying you any interest. What do you think is going to happen there? What about all the people who hold T-bills in the United States? What about savings bonds? That would absolutely collapse the economy. You understand that the current IRS tax code, I don't know why I threw that in there, but anyway, the current IRS tax code cannot handle the current debt situation we have. It's impossible. You could double it. We still can't get there. And I'll really throw it at you. The last number, as if you had to guess, gets worse. It's unfunded Medicare and Social Security. Some of you already know this. From the Medicare Trustees Report said we owe $107 trillion in today's dollars. Go back to our little $21,000 a year household. You overspend 16 grand. You owe $143,000 to the banks. You owe your parents a cool $1 million. What are you going to do now? If you take that $7,000 and put it towards it, assuming no cost of living increases, you got another 154 years of double taxes. That's a cool 175 years just to pay that off. Now, I think it's important, I think it's absolutely critical that people understand these relationships, because they're talking about dinky little changes, okay? This is serious, and we've got to get a handle on it, and we can't do it with the current IRS tax code.